In Europe, Kyogre almost won the Birmingham Regional Championships. Let's talk about it.
A KO'd Ogerpon, and that's respectable damage still into that Kyogre with the Choice Specs Volt Switch. But now this Iron Hands is going to have to take an attack from this Kyogre. It might be the Ice Beam, because that would have been able to knock out the Miraidon from the range it's at. And if that's the case, it would survive. But if it's Origin Pulse, that's going to be in range because it's now single target.
100%. And now William is down to...
And it was!
There we go. Origin Pulse, single target, and it connects. And Iron Hands does go probably a lot of good damage if it's allowed to come off at this point. So first, though, is that U-turn. Seeing that Rillaboom naturally outspeed that Ogerpon is quite something.
Wow,
Switches out, which makes a lot of sense with the drum beating potential. But Rillaboom is out of there to come back in at a later point to reset the electric terrain when Miraidon comes back in. Urshifu coming in there could be dangerous, but there is an Igogel. Great call from William. Inzeko and doing 50%, not even terrored as well, Jamie.
Yeah.
Origin Pulse, though, does get the KO in return.
Yeah, it does, but this Iron Hands is able to shrug it off reasonably comfortably, so it's able to respond with a low kick, and Kyogre, being as heavy as it is felled to that attack, bringing Oliver down to his final two Pokemon.
That is a lot.
Getting that attack boost. Is that going to be enough to allow a KO into this Kyogre if it does not protect the stone, which it did not? That is a Choice Specs Draco Meteor doing very good damage to that opposing Kyogre. We saw it do 50% previously, but no, the drum beating, because remember the Rillaboom is incredibly speedy. That puts the Ogerpon now slower than this Kyogre. It needs to connect this Origin Pulse, otherwise it will be KO'd. Something has dodged, and it's going to be the Ogerpon. The Origin Pulse! That means it survives this turn and is able to fire off the +1 Ivy Cudgel into this now Grass Terror Kyogre, and that is enough to pick up the KO, and the restricted is gone on turn 2 for Oliver.
This is a team that Oliver, who just came in second place, was using, and he was running the Kyogre team that was not running the Water Spout. One thing that was really great about his team, and quite interesting, was his Rillaboom. His Rillaboom was actually very fast, and or the championship team, which we'll go into, had a very slow Ogerpon. Put those two together, he was able to also create a form of speed control with the drum beating to drop the speed of his opponents. The one challenge that came to pass was whether or not the Kyogre will be able to make contact with all of its Origin Pulses. His Kyogre was running the Origin Pulse, Ice Beam, Calm Mind, Protect. Now with that Calm Mind, you're going to be able to survive a lot of the special attacks that's coming his way. So what I would predict is during the run of the tournament, he would have more speed control running his Roaring Moon. He will have the Redirection with his Amoonguss, the Incineroar with the Fake Out Pressure plus the Intimidate. So you're also continuing to boost the defense of the Kyogre. And if you get the Tailwind off with his Booster Energy, more than likely speed on Roaring Moon, then he can get immediate fast Origin Pulses or possibly get an immediate fast Calm Mind out. We also have the Choice Scarf on his Urshifu, so a lot of speed on his team, which can cause, of course, there be challenges in terms of going against like a Trick Room, but that Amoonguss can help thwart the idea of opponents running the Trick Room because you can then go for the Spore and put your opponents asleep. So it's a very good team, and it's something that should be on everyone's radar because of the fact of how these Pokemon usage stats have been changing based upon the data that was given at this tournament. So we'll go ahead and look at that first, and then we'll go ahead and look at some more of those teams that we're playing. All right, so we're in terms of the day one, we have the list of the unrestricted Pokemon, and we're just going to basically go through the list of the Pokemon and see how they were broken down in terms of the usage stat of the top 12 Pokemon. In first place, we have Urshifu Rapid Strikes. So this Pokemon, of course, it's going to be running those very fast Surging Strikes. If you have it partnered with a Kyogre, for example, then you got massive damage. You know, your opponents can't protect, and it applies a lot of offensive pressure to where it kind of forces your opponent to either go for a fake out against you, or they're going to basically have to focus onto this Pokemon, or do another swap to just take on some damage, because the fact that they can't protect in front of this Pokemon is going to be their biggest challenge. We also have the Rillaboom, which is going to be the standard thing, because Rillaboom and Incineroar, they are going to be the top threats because of their fake out supports. The grassy terrain with the Rillaboom are going against like Miraidon, so you have that terrain control. Incineroar, which is of course going to have that Intimidate on switching. You can run it with the, of course you're going to have the fake out there, but then you're also going to potentially be running the, you could be doing like, for example, Will-O-Wisp. You could also be doing, you could even run a taunt. You can run knockoff. I mean, Incineroar runs so many different tools to where it can become so oppressive, and with its natural bulk, it's going to be almost impossible to take out. This is a huge threat in terms of the metagame, so you're probably going to always need to have one on your team, or a very good answer for it if you don't have one on your team. Then following Incineroar, we had Flutter Mane. With Flutter Mane, you have great speed control for the Icy Wind potential. We also have the possibility for definitely a great deal of damage with the Moonblast. We can also run, you can also have a very fast taunt if need be. You can run this thing with either Booster Energy or Focus Sash, things of the sort, because with the Booster Energy, for example, you can have a higher speed right off the bat, or you can even run it with like a Choice Specs if you're going to be just going for massive damage. Various ways in which how this Flutter Mane can actually run, but it is typically a very frail Pokemon in terms of the physical side. There are some ways that you can run it to where it can survive some of those physical attacks, but it depends on how you're going to invest in the Pokemon. Of course, it's really good, but the fast taunt is very great. Icy Wind, speed control, that's also typically going to be your main focus, is utilizing the Flutter Mane there. Of course, we have the Amoonguss, who has the Regenerator ability. Naturally, by swapping out, you're going to gain more health. You can have the Pollen Puff for side recovery for your teammates. You provide, of course, great support utilizing the Spore. We also have the Rage Powder. Redirection with that, naturally, you're running great. You're running super well with this Pokemon. And typically what a lot of people do is they will run it holding the Rocky Helmet. So using that Rage Powder plus having the Rocky Helmet for physical attacks will cause more chip damage typically to the opponent, while the Amoonguss will typically stay pretty healthy. And then also we have Raging Bolt. Raging Bolt is, of course, basically like a legendary by itself. Even with the photosynthesis, whether it's being active or not, this Pokemon is naturally very tanky, has a lot of special attack just naturally. It has the priority for the Thunderclap. We also have potentially for the Thunderbolt, or you can go with speed control and you can just go with Electro Web. I mean, there's various ways of how this Pokemon can in fact run. You also have access to Snarl. Once again, the versatility of this Pokemon makes it even better. Plus, with its general typing, makes it very resilient to a lot of different oncoming attacks. This definitely makes this Pokemon very threatening against a lot of Pokemon in the metagame, including the restricted legendary. So this Pokemon is not one to be slept on. So you want to make sure you're being prepared for that. Now, Farigiraf is going to be a very big key, because Farigiraf has the ability, Armor Tail, which is preventing any type of priority moves. So if it runs the Armor Tail and your opponent is going with their fake outs, then the Farigiraf is blocking the fake outs on your team. So at that point, your team is able to do good damage immediately. And if you know you have a speed advantage and you're suspecting that your opponent is going to be going for their fake out, you can swap into your Farigiraf, and that will then prevent them from being able to use their fake out, and they basically wasted their turn, and you can capitalize on that. Believe that was also one thing that you would notice if you go back and watch the full stream of the championship battle. You would notice that most of the time Oliver did not utilize his fake out because he did not know whether or not the champion ended up bringing the Farigiraf. And because of that, he had to be very conscientious of when he was to use fake out, because of course the opponent could have swapped into the Farigiraf and then wasted his turn, and facing on that much damage output that could come from the Ogerpon or from that Miraidon, it was such a grave threat to where it automatically plays a mind game by just simply having this Pokemon on your team. So that is something that is very important with that. Pokemon Heartflame came in at 8th place with the possible terrestrialization, boosting your attack and you always keep that ability. It's not just the first time it comes in battle. That is something that makes this Pokemon very dangerous. Also with that grass attack as well, you can run it with either Wood Hammer, you can also go Ivy Cudgel. That will of course be your fire typing at that moment. You can also do Horn Leech, which will give you some recovery. You have access to the Spiky Shield, which is an excellent form of protect. You can instead change one of your grass type moves and change it in for a Follow Me if you're needing for any form of redirection. It makes this Pokemon very versatile in how it's going into battle, and the amount of damage that it can put out, plus the high critical hit ratio of that Ivy Cudgel makes it a very big threat. Then coming in on the 9th place was Iron Hands, which with its Quark Drive ability, even without utilizing it, you don't even have to run it on a Miraidon team. It puts out a lot of damage because it's naturally very bulky with the amount of HP that it has. We also have Fake Out support, very powerful wild charges, so if you're going against water types, you're able to do massive damage there. You also run Low Kick. You saw in the opening scene, you see the Low Kick and how much damage it does to a lot of these restricteds. Iron Hands is able to throw out those low kicks and just start smacking the opponents, especially on those restricted legendaries. So definitely take note of that because it puts out a lot of damage from just simply having that attack there. Your best bet in going against an Iron Hands is a lot of Intimidate and or just get that thing burned, because the amount of damage that it puts out is so dangerous that it can be a major threat. So I definitely love Iron Hands myself, but you definitely want to make sure you have something to answer that Pokemon there. Coming in on the 10th place is going to be Chen Pao, which of course with its natural ability, the Sword of Ruin, dropping the defenses of your opponents, definitely plays out a lot of damage on your opponent, so nothing really here to say about that. We have the Chi-Yu, which can run typically with like the Choice Scarf, or it can be Focus Sash, or even Covert Cloak. I mean, various items that it can actually run, but it puts out a lot of damage. Plus with its ability of the Beads of Ruin, dropping the special defense of everyone on the field, it's amazing, and it helps plenty of support on the team, similar to the fact that, for example, having it partnered with a Miraidon, you can do a lot of special attack damage, put on its choice specs if you want, or even run more speed as opposed to going modest and then partner it with the Chi-Yu. You're doing massive damage just right off the bat because you have that ability to help support the damage output on your Miraidon. And then we have the Whimsicott, which is going to be great because it has the standard Encore. Prankster Encore, dangerous. You go for a Protect, Whimsicott swaps in on that, capitalizes, and throws on an Encore. That Pokemon is now shut down. But if you can predict that, then you can also swap out to another Pokemon if you have somebody in the back, and then they can waste their turn of the Encore, and then you can capitalize on that and get rid of the Whimsicott. Depends on the variations with that, but of course it also has that speed control with the Tailwind, so though that combination is very dangerous. So you really want to watch out for what those Whimsicotts are going to be doing. Now, before we go into the restricted, let's look at day 2 in terms of the unrestricted Pokemon. Now, there has not been that much of a change. We still have the Urshifu Rapid Strikes. Amoonguss hops up in usage, actually, and it comes in 2nd place. We still got Rillaboom, Incineroar. Those are still our 3rd and 4th place. Then we got the Raging Bolt. Raging Bolt hopped up. It's still pretty much high up there. We have still the Farigiraf, we still got the Fluttermane, Chi-Yu, Iron Hands, Chen Pao, but then we have somebody else that just decides to jump in, and that's Urshifu Single Strike. Urshifu Single Strike is something that I've been using on some of my videos, so if you haven't been able to check those out, make sure you hop over to the Raikazi11 YouTube page, so make sure you see those videos. But with the Urshifu Single Strike, it is able to pressure a lot of the high usage Pokemon like the Calyrex. The fact that you can run it still with a Choice Scarf and go with a Wicked Blow, that automatically forces, for example, a Calyrex Shadow to Terastallize. And if you have a partner that can capitalize on a typical fairy typing terrestrialization or even a normal typing terrestrialization, but even if they go normal, they're going to still take a great deal of damage. But then you can capitalize on that and do massive damage because they won't really want to go for the Astral Barrage because it's not going to really hurt a fighting dark type. But if you are predicting them to do that terrestrialization, or if they burn their terra pretty early, then you can capitalize on that and then go with like a close combat, or even what, especially like on a Choice Scarf set, you may want to go ahead and run it with a Poison Jab. And if they go Terra Fairy, boom, you got that coverage right there. You don't even have to run it necessarily with the Choice Scarf. You can always go with a Focus Sash, for example. And then if you have somebody to support it that has good speed control or something of that nature, then you can go ahead and do that. And the fact that the opponent won't be able to go for their protects, then you're able to just go ham and just do massive damage right then and there. So that's going to be the biggest key for that. And then we also, once again, still have the Ogerpon Heartflame that's going to be coming in as well. So those are going to be the non-restricteds from day 1 and day 2. Before we go any further, I want to say thank you so very much for joining us here at Card Shark Dojo. Be sure that you are leaving a like, sharing, and subscribing, as it's going to greatly help us out as we are trying to grow this channel. And also make sure you have those notifications turned on so you don't miss when the next video goes live. Also, sometimes I know you all just want to sit back and not take things so seriously. So with that in mind, head on over to the Raikaze Twitch and YouTube page. There, we do various forms of content, including my very special Pokemon Roulette VGC series, other video games, skits, reactions, as well as reviews. So if you want to see some fun videos, learn about some new anime, play some other types of games, or anything of that sort, be sure to head on to those pages and subscribe for the fun. Links to those various channels are in the description box below. I hope to see y'all there. But for now, back to the video. Well, now let's look at the restricted Pokemon from day 1, and then we'll look at it from day 2. So for day 1, if you all had not seen the video that we have done here on this channel talking about the tiering of the restricted legendaries, make sure you are going to check that video out, because this is basically following just almost to a T of how we actually class those Pokemon. We have Calyrex Shadow, who still was at number 1 for day 1. A ton of them there. Then we have Miraidon. Miraidon was just barely cut from under that of the Calyrex Shadow. Then we have the Calyrex Ice. So these 3 mons were still top of the line. Then Zamazenta climbing up the ranks, just as we had predicted there. But then we made a little bit of a difference here. So that's when that's when it changed over to putting in Kyogre ahead of Terapagos. Kyogre, which we should know that it runs typically with the Water Spout, does more damage the more HP it has. We also have the Origin Pulse, and then it typically will run Ice Beam. Now there are various sets that can come out, so you can run it with a Leftovers just for more recovery, and then you're going with that of like the Protect, or you can go with like an Assault Vest and just continue to have just massive damage while basically surviving all special attacks. And then you just want to change this out for like a different move, just varies on that. Or you can even go with like a Cobra Cloak and not worry about what type of fake out pressure your opponent has, or it depends on what your team is built with, because if you have, for example, the Farigiraf, then you're going to be able to not even worry about that as well. So it just varies on how you're actually going to be doing that. Then we have Terapagos, who is just Terapagos. We know how Terapagos typically runs. We have the Terra Starstorm, but of course one thing that is about the Terapagos is that it's going to be your Terra Abuser. So the fact that if you see a Terapagos, you are pretty much guaranteed that the rest of the team will not be using the Terastallization. But that's not a 100% guarantee, but it's pretty much the case. Then we have Koraidon, who is running really well out there, and then we also then have the Groudon. Now, Groudon is also a beautiful Pokemon, that the fact that it is climbing up the ranks. It is my favorite restricted legendary of all time. I've always loved Groudon, and Koraidon is one of my top ones as well, so I'm glad to see that they are actually having the fame coming into play. But now, that is still day 1. Now let's look at day 2. Day 2 restricteds don't really change that much, except for the order. So now in terms of number 1, we have Miraidon. So Miraidon makes it all the way up to number 1 spot, and of course it won the championship yet again, and we'll get ready to go over that team. We have the Zamazenta, who also can run, which we didn't even talk about there, but can run the Wide Guard. The fact that it has that opportunity, it can shut down the Calyrex Ice plus the Calyrex Shadow, just depending on whether or not you do have that wide guard and what your opponents are doing. It also definitely shuts down the Kyogre, because Kyogre runs a lot of those spread water attacks, while Zamazenta can sit there, use wide guard, and if your teammate resists any form of ice attacks at the same time, then that teammate can whittle down on the Kyogre because it can't use its water attacks right then and there. So you're pretty much set in that regard. You also have then, of course, Calyrex Ice, which we know how that Pokemon works. We already talked about the Kyogre. Then we have Calyrex Shadow. Then Terapagos, it comes in, which is interesting that Terapagos is behind Calyrex Shadow, because in day 2, Terapagos becomes the counter to that of Calyrex Shadow. And typically, most players that are utilizing the Calyrex Shadow are very concerned with going against the Terapagos, because that's just naturally the thing. But then we get Koraidon still once again, who then still can threaten that of the Terapagos. And then we also have Groudon. Now, the one thing that is the difference between the Groudon and Koraidon is the fact that Koraidon's offensive power is slightly reduced when it does not have the sun running, while Groudon does not worry about that. Groudon, regardless of the sun, is able to do the damage that it normally does, except for the fact that its Precipice Blades can miss, and also if you run it with Heat Crash, if the opponent does shut off the sunlight, then your Heat Crash is not going to be able to do as much damage. So that is where there are some limitations. But these Pokemon technically run in a different way in comparison. So Koraidon is considered like a form of a Groudon, but in all honesty, they really are vastly different, with their typing being different, plus the types of moves that they use. That is where there are challenges there, because Groudon's rise is coming in to compete against that of Miraidon. Miraidon's going with these electric attacks and the Dazzling Gleam, which Groudon is not worried about that, but it will worry about a Draco Meteor. So, with that being said, these are the top restricted Pokemon that made it into day 2 at this tournament. But now let's go ahead and look at a couple of the very top teams of the tournament. Now, going back into Lab Mouse, we're going to look at a few of the top teams that placed at the Birmingham Regionals. Now, one thing is William Bassolino, who was the winner, he ran one of the previous championship teams. So this is going to be the Choice Specs Miraidon. That is also going to be the Terra Fairy, which is going to be slightly different than what the previous championship was, as opposed to being a Terra Electric. But it's running the Dazzling Gleam, Draco Meteor, Volt Switch, and Electro Drift. So pretty standard moveset overall. But one thing that was very interesting was the fact of his speed with his Ogerpon. What we would notice in that video was the fact that the opposing Rillaboom was able to outspeed his Ogerpon. So even with the amount of speed investment that they put into the Rillaboom, I'm still shocked that it was able to outpace that of an Ogerpon. However, when you have a Pokemon that also runs along with a Trick Room on the Farigiraf, plus a Tailwind on the Whimsicott, then it provides the proper support where the investment can go in different areas onto that Ogerpon, to where it's not super stressed about its speed. Also, the fact that it runs like Follow Me and the Spiky Shield, perhaps the purpose of the Ogerpon is not necessarily for the damage output. And also, when the opponent is suspecting a faster Ogerpon, you can then capitalize on that in just one of the rounds or so, where you surprise them and like, oh, I'm running Follow Me, Follow Me. So then that has the high priority. But then when you go for the attack, you may be at a different speed tier, and they would expect something different when you actually weren't. Then you can set up a Tailwind, Trick Room, whatever, and then you provide that outpacing, and then you're like, oh wait, what is your actual speed? So I think that is something that's very clever. They still have the standard Electric Seed on, and they still have the standard Electric Seed on their Farigiraf. It is a Terra Water, which I find that interesting, because even though it has the Armor Tail ability, if they went against a Raging Bolt, they can get hit by a Thunderbolt. So I find that to be a little bit interesting there. The Iron Hands, which I mentioned before, is that low kick. That low kick does a ton of damage on a lot of these restricted legendaries because they are so heavy, because they are giants basically. So you really want to be on the lookout for that, especially if you get something like a boost with the electric terrain, put that together with a Quark Drive, so then your attack goes higher. Then you can get a low kick out, and then boom, you're doing massive damage there. The Terra Poison, which is really good. Yes, you are severely weak against ground types, types. However, if you're going against, like, for example, a fairy type, then if they're going for those dazzling gleams or things like that, you're going to be able to resist that, and then you can go for a heavy slam onto those fairies and then do massive damage to them. So that is something that's really, really good. So something to definitely take note of there. You have the Covert Cloak on the Whimsicott, and also you have the Terra Dark. So running it with the Terra Dark will allow you to not get prankstered yourself. So now let's say you're going against a Tornadus that's going to be going for their prankster taunt. You can go into Terra Dark if you're really worried about that and not be able to be affected by that. And then you also have good support with that light screen, so that's awesome there. So that provides additional special defense on your team, so that's really good there. Once again, recovering back on the runner-up, Oliver's team. His team was really good. One thing that's interesting is we've got Terra Steel on his Amoonguss. I think that'll be really good against, like, maybe Side Spam, if that is even a thing anymore. But aside from that, though, that still makes it really weak to fire attacks. So I would really still be a little concerned about going into the Terra Steel. But, I mean, he made it to runner-up, so I'm not going to basically judge him on that, because he made it pretty far. Next team here. Now, Alex Gomez Berna, they came in with a Terapagos team. So let's take a look at that team there. We have an Assault Vest on their Raging Bolt, Terra Fairy, Dragon Pulse, Volt Switch, Thunderclap, Electroweb. So there's that speed control we were talking about there. We have Safety Goggles on the Incineroar, so it can't be redirected by Rage Powder. We have the Fake Out, Knockoff, Parting Shot. The Will-O-Wisp is really good because it helps shut down on the Calyrex Ice if they have not terrestrialized into their fire type. So that's something set for there. And if the opponent then goes for any forms of, like, fighting attacks, then you can go into a Terra Ghost and resist that. We have Urshifu Rapid Strike, which is Terra Poison, which is interesting. We got Terra Poison on that one. Protect, Close Combat, Surging Strikes, Aqua Jet. Interesting. I find that to be an interesting typing. There we have Icy Wind, Thunder Wave, Taunt, Moonblast, and there's what we were talking about before, is the high speed on the taunt. But the fact that it's also running the Thunder Wave in addition to the Icy Wind is super good. So this gives it a very fast Thunder Wave, so it's not based upon Prankster. Also, if you are worried about going for Icy Wind, let's say if your opponent's got like a Chen Pao, which is on that high usage, and they're going for the Sucker Punch, you can run with the Thunder Wave. You can use that Thunder Wave to help paralyze it if it is still at like high HP or something of that sort. So this is something that's really, really good for speed control there. The fact that it is Terra Fairy is also really good. Other options would be like a Terra Normal if you're really worried about that of the Calyrex Shadow or something of that sort. We have a Terrifier on the Amoonguss, which is something I'm more expecting to see, because if you're going against something like a Groudon that's going for the Heat Crash or the Ogerpon Fire, things like that, then you can Terra into the Fire type, so then you will be able to resist it. As a Grass type going against an Ogerpon Fire, then you get severely damaged against the Ivy Cudgel from a Hurt Flame, but then you can Terrasilize into the Fire type and go for that Sludge Bomb and do massive damage against that of the Ogerpon Heart Flame. Of course, the Ogerpon can then go for their own Terrasilization, still do a good bit of damage to you, but then that's where you're going for like Rage Powder, Spore, or something like that. Then we also have the Terapagos, which is the leftover. So that's the Calm Mind, Terra Starstorm, Protect, Substitute. So that's one of the standard things with the Terapagos. It goes for the Calm Mind first because it wants to boost on the special attack and special defense. Then it runs for that Substitute. So the fact that it goes for the Substitute later on is because it's still using its Terra Shift ability while it's at full health to not take as much damage. Then it's going to try to go for the Protect to get some leftover recovery. One thing I am seeing that's surprising is the fact that this Amoonguss does not have Pollen Puff to try to bring it back up to full health. So this is going to have to use its Terrasilization, because the key here is that Terapagos is not able to hit a Ghost type unless it Terrasilizes. And even going against a Steel type, it's not going to do that much damage until it Terrasilizes. So that is something that's severe key about a Terapagos. So it's very limited, and this is where if you catch this Pokemon into a Terrasilization, if you have somebody that has Wide Guard, and if you can eliminate all the partners of the Terapagos, you can basically clutch the match from that point forward. Now Federico, he also ran a Zamazenta team, so this is another top team here. We have it running with the Assault Vest also on the Raging Bolt, but it's Terra type electric. This one runs it with the Snarl, so instead of going with the Electro Web and also with the Dragon Pulse, it's going Draco Meteor Snarl. So Snarl for boosting the special defense basically on your team, because you're basically shutting down the special attack offense of the opponents. The Thunderbolt and Thunderclap, definitely great stab. We also have, of course, Draco Meteor if you're just trying to just give as much damage output as you possibly can in one strike at that moment. We also have the, there we go, we got it, Wide Guard on the Zamazenta, Heavy Slam, Body Press, Protect. If you also have not seen the video that we put out about how to run Zamazenta, make sure you're going ahead and checking out that video, because we posted it out there. And here you see the fact that it is going to be Terra Dragon. One thing that's really good about that is the fact that as a dragon type, then if the opponent decides that they have to use, like, for example, a fairy type, then you have your Heavy Slam. Now, if your opponent in open team sheet is deciding to go with their fairy attack, like a Dazzling Gleam instead, then you can also just go with a Wide Guard and you're protecting your team there. So this Pokemon is extremely good. Extremely good. We also have on their Flutter Mane has the Icy Wind for that speed controls. That can also help in terms of the Zamazenta. We have the Ice Spinner for terrain control as well. Throat Chop, Sucker Punch, Protect. Pretty standard there. Terra Water on the Amoonguss, so that's awesome there. So we got Sludge Bomb, Spore, Rage Powder, Protect. Also another Pokemon here that does not have the Pollen Puff. That's interesting. So no Pollen Puff on the Amoonguss. People have been dropping off from that. That's interesting. Then we have the Chi-Yu Choice Scarf with the Terra Ghost. So Heat Wave, Dark Pulse, Overheat. So that Overheat's going to be a massive damage there. But the fact that it's Choice, so that's still going to be immediate damage there. And we have Snarl. With the Choice Scarf being on the team there, you can do that to basically shut down the opposing Pokemon if that has high special attack. Even if you're going against like Kyogre or something like that, you can use your Terra Ghost, basically drop the special attack of the opponent, plus in addition to that, drop your weakness to water attacks. And Chi-Yu does have very good special defense, so it may be able to tank certain moves, but of course if you're going against like a Kyogre in the rain, it still might be a bit of a challenge. But then if we were partnering with a Zamazenta and going against a Kyogre, you go for a Wide Guard and Snarl. I mean, from that point, you're basically severely weakening the Kyogre. It can't really do anything. So I wonder what we'll do, actually. Let's take a look at some of the teams that Federico actually went up against and see if they were having any issues with going against a Kyogre team. So if we go back to Federico, we just basically click here on Lab Mouse. So this is going to be something that's very important there to see what our options are. So he actually did lose going against this Kyogre team against Oliver. So of course Oliver came in second place. So I mean, so that is something to say. But he went against a different one. And one thing that I'm actually noticing here is that if we look at this, Incineroar, Urshifu Water, Kyogre, there's Roaring Moon, there's Rillaboom, and there's Amoonguss. So these two, I wonder if Adrian and Oliver both built the same team together. But the fact is that Federico was able to defeat Adrian, however, was not able to defeat Oliver. So something would have transpired in that regard to be unable to defeat him there. Then, of course, if you went against, for example, maybe going against like this Groudon team, and if you had your Zamazenta, you have the Wide Guard for the Precipice Blades, and if they go for the Heat Crash, if you were already a Terra Dragon, then it's not going to do that much damage. So then you just have to have your additional support there to try to take them out. So like if they didn't Terrasilize, your Chien-Pao doing massive damage. If they go Terra Fire, then at some point you'll just have to go for the Body Press and just do as much damage as you possibly can. That's the best thing I can think of right off the bat there. Oh, and they were even with the Jumpluff. That's interesting. I wonder how they were able to stop it. Just some things that's just very curious, and I'm just wondering about that. So interesting to see what teams that they faced off against and how they were able to pilot it to defeat their opponents at a best of 3. But it is actually something to be interested in. Now we're going back over to 5th place here. We have Alberto Gomez, who, is this the same team as well? This is the same team as William as well. We have Incineroar. Yeah, let's see if they're running the exact same moves. No, so these are a bit of different moves here. So we got the Surging Strikes, Close Combat, U-Turn, Aqua Jet. So that's standard for Choice Scarf, Water, Urshifu. We have the Tailwind, Protect, Acrobatics, Knockoff. Origin Pulse, Ice Beam, Calm Mind, Protect. So that's just like Oliver's team. But their Rillaboom is Assault Vest, Wood Hammer, as opposed to the Drum Beating, Grassy Glide, Fake Out, and U-Turn. Then, of course, we have the safety goggles once again on their Incineroar. So this is still the same thing. We have Spore, Rage Powder, Sludge Bomb, Protect. So let's go back and see Oliver's team and see whether or not if he was, in fact, no, he was the Terra Steel. So it wasn't Fairy, and his is the Terra Fire, while Alberto's is also Terra Fire. But the Terra Fire is a pretty standard thing. But so these teams are very similar. I really wonder if these individuals were partnering up in some form or fashion, because Kyogre has made a climb, but they're making the climb on the exact same team. Here's another one right here in 9th place. Let's go by Calvin Foster. Let's see how they were running theirs. Calm Mind, Protect, Ice Beam, Origin Pulse, Terra Grass, same thing. Leftovers once again. There we go. We got a Terra Ghost on the Urshifu Rapid Strike, Surging Strikes, Close Combat, Aqua Jet, U-Turn. Terra Steel, so they're doing that again. Sludge Bomb, Spore, Rage Powder, Protect. Drum Beating. Look at that. Drum Beating right there. So this, either they were training together or somebody's pulled a team from somewhere and was piloting it together. So I am curious about that to see what is the origin of that team. Wonder if there's anything that is super special. Now I do want to see if there's anything special climbing up the ranks, and so we have a Calyrex Ice team that's running with only Lando I, partnered with Grimmsnarl. That's interesting. So Light Clay, Prankster, yep, Foul Play. Foul Play is really good. Thunder Wave, Reflect Light Screen, Fake Out, Wild Charge, Drain Punch, Heavy Slam, Terra Normal. So this here, Terra Normal, Calyrex Ice, basically shuts down the Calyrex Shadow. Then we have the Trick Room Protect, so that's something already really good. Earth Powers, Sandsear Storm, Sludge Bomb Protect, okay. Terra Water, so there's the Pollen Puff, so there's somebody that's still running the Pollen Puff there. And they got their Mystic Water, Urshifu Rapid Strikes, Surgical Strikes, Close Combat, Taunt. That's interesting. So they're running the Taunt on their Urshifu and Detect. Challenge with this team, well, may not. I was going to say it would be Speed Control because you're not fast enough to run that Taunt, depending on which Pokemon you're going against. But with the Thunder Wave on the Grimmsnarl, then you possibly can be. So, okay, that's interesting. Interesting indeed. Let's take a look at a few more here because I do want to see of some of these Groudon teams. So Groudon, who made it up to 7th place in the day 2 of the tournament here, also partnered with the Dark Urshifu. So let's take a look at this team here. So this is by Flavio. This should be Flavio. Flavio Del Pidios. So this is a Heart Flame Ogerpon. So there's a lot of fire on this team. Lots of fire on this team. So I can already see that that can be a challenge if your opponent runs Rain. But if you were to partner a Jumpluff who is naturally really fast, yeah, theirs is Tailwind, Encore, Rage Powder, Sleep Powder. However, if you were able to use this with, for example, Sunny Day, that might be something that may be more beneficial as opposed to the Rage Powder, because that fact that if they swap into rain can shut your team down, where in fact if you can summon the sunlight and weaken the damage from their water attacks might be really, really good. I know I mentioned before that the fact that the Groudon is able to still do natural damage. However, you still want to reduce the damage that's coming against you. Yes, your sleep powder can still shut down the opponents, so that might be a thing to where you're just saying, hey, I want to make sure I just shut them down by putting them to sleep. However, there is a chance to miss that move. So because of that, I think there may be something else that we might be missing in terms of utilizing in the jump bluff there, depending on how the team is running. We have Terra Water on the Raging Bolt. I think that's really good. We also have Thunderbolt, Electro Wave, Thunderclap, Draco Meteor, so that's awesome there. We have knockoff Will-O-Wisp, Parting Shot, Fake Out. So one thing we also are noticing is that the Incineroars in this format has dropped off from their Flare Blitz. They are sticking with just the knockoff plus the Will-O-Wisp. And move here typically would be Parting Shots. Sometimes you might see it slightly different depending on the Incineroar, but usually it's going to be the Parting Shot and running that Fake Out there. This one being with the Rocky Helmet is allowed to use that Terrestrialization to then allow a Urshifu Water, for example, to do massive damage into it. However, it'll do a lot of chip right back against a Water Urshifu. We also have a Terra Dark Urshifu Dark type as well, so you're double dipping into that Dark type. But we have that Focus Sash, so you're going to get massive damage coming out from that Wicked Blow Close Combat Sucker Punch. So the Sucker Punch and that Wicked Blow going to be doing excellent damage. So even if you're terrestrializing into a Fairy type, that Wicked Blow is going to do massive damage. So definitely a great deal there. And plus with the Electro Web coming from the Raging Bolt, you can do a Detect on your first turn, so you're not really worried about speed control there. Do a Detect, hit that Electro Web, get that speed control, and then go for a Terra Wicked Blow at that point and do massive damage against the opponent there. So very good team. And I'm loving the fact that we're seeing Groudon climbing the ranks. The fact that we have a Kyogre that made it into the second place spot is really good. But the fact is that we do have a number of them that are running with the same teammates is very interesting. I am wondering whether or not they built their teams together or if there's anything else that was going on there. We do still have some more variations of the team, so in case if you want to look further into additional teams, be sure to head on over to LabMaus, so that's LABMAUS, so that way you can see the differences of that team. But before we close, I'm going to go ahead and look at this team. 11th place, unless this is an error. Let me see if this is an error or not, because this looks like a regular Calyrex in 11th place. Let me see if this is really true. No, this is just an error. This is just an error. Okay, it's just an error. So I was just really concerned there, but they just used a different image by mistake there because it does have the Glacial Land, so that is going to be Calyrex Ice. So nothing too concerning there. I thought that was just going to be a regular Calyrex. I was about to say, whoa, what is going on here? But with that being said, we're going to end it here. If you, like I said, if you want to go ahead and hop in on the LabMaus, you can take a look and just review the previous tournaments from the Birmingham Pokemon Regional Championships. You just type that in. You can see all the placements and the open team sheets there. So, of course, it does not have the IVs or EVs broken down, so you want to go ahead and play around with that. Definitely check out our videos that we have been posting to see how we are building our teams to structure around some of these restricted legendaries. And also, once again, head on over to my page at Raikazi11 on YouTube there, to where you see even some of my fun team building, where we even use like more uncommon Pokemon depending on what the roulette determines, and still make them more viable based upon what we're working with in terms of that team. A lot of team building tutorials out there, so make sure you are in fact subscribing and turning on those notifications so you'll be notified when those videos come out. But at this moment in time, this is going to be the Raikazi signing off. You all know what to do. You stay strong and you power on. We catch y'all later.